Thanks for tuning into That Husband Podcast. Today we are joined by Kathy Combrink from Mohau Counseling Center, and she speaks to us about domestic abuse. We unpack that, what that really looks like, from financial abuse to spiritual abuse to emotional abuse. And lastly, we end off speaking about perpetrators of abuse. How do we even identify if we are perpetrators ourselves, what the healing journey and process for perpetrators looks like. All of this on today's episode. Hey, what's up? Welcome to That Husband Podcast with me, Black Newborn. Here we are husbands who aren't where we want to be, but certainly are not where we used to be. We are imperfect, always failing forward, trying to know better so that we can do better. Hey, what's up? Welcome to That Husband Podcast with me, Black Newborn. This is where husbands try to know better so that we can do better. If you like me, you probably did not read the disclaimer, but let me just say this. It's going to be an episode with a lot of sensitive information, stories that we might share that might trigger some viewers. So if you're watching with kids, please take them out of the room. Watch this before you consider watching it with them. And if it might be a bit triggering and sensitive for you at any point, please do take care of yourself, switch off. But we want to do this because we know there's a lot of people who watch our content who are in very difficult situations. And so how can we be a mouthpiece to help them to reach out, to even start the conversation so that they can seek help? We don't have a husband today. We have a wife.
An amazing wife.
Wow. I don't know.
You're going to have to ask my husband about that.
I did. He was like, if you can get out of the house for an hour, please take her. Kathy Combrink. Mm-hmm. How are you, Kathy? We fist bump on this podcast.
These mics are like,
So. Yeah. You good?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. Thank you for coming, for wanting to talk to us about what we're going to speak about. It's a big one. Mm-hmm. And obviously it's your line of work and you're very involved with that. You work for a counseling center called Mohau. Mm-hmm. Who's Mohau? What do you guys do?
Mohau means mercy or grace. And so we are in the business of extending mercy and grace to those who need it, and includes ourselves. And so that's quite... it's a title that applies to us as those who serve in the center and those who come into the center. Yeah. We care for people through counseling, Christian or biblical counseling, and specifically in the area of trauma. And so we do all sorts of counseling and support groups and referral to places where we can't help somebody anymore. We can't help somebody. We send them on to the next person who will be able to help them where we kind of fall short. So when our scope of practice ends, we want to be able to refer them on to places where they can be cared for as a whole person, not just in counseling. I guess that's in a nutshell.
Yeah, and I think that's dope. That's such a, and that's why I was like, I think you put it well, because some people tend to think that they can be everything for someone. And I think knowing your strengths then would say, okay, I've reached my limit, but I know somebody who can help you in other ways, so. Trauma
is complex. Yeah. Abuse is complex. And so stepping into those spaces, you need to understand the complexities. So that's a privilege to be able to do that.
Sure. How long have you been doing this work?
Okay, so it's about 16 years now.
Okay.
Sure. That I've been counseling in this space, in the church space. And the center's been running now for 3 years. Okay. Going on our 4th year. So it's exciting to have a place where we can receive people. Sure. That is, and we can create this space where before we had the center, we were counseling kind of anywhere and everywhere. We have a space now, which is really exciting.
Yeah. I mean, this is probably like a silly question, but I know I've thought about it, but a long time ago.
If it comes from your head, Black,
then it's a silly
then you know
question.
It's going to be
What's
silly,
the difference between what you do and what a psychologist does?
Okay.
Yeah.
That's actually a very good question. So I'm a biblical counselor.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'd call it a Christian counselor.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so what that means is I use the Bible as my foundation, like a manual to life, right? So, God created us and he gives us, guidelines on how life works best. And so we look to the Bible to go, this is how life works best. This is how we understand ourselves. Look, why, in terms of purpose, why has he created us? And why are we here? And those kind of core questions help us interpret the world around us as well. And so we use the Bible as our kind of handbook to life, our foundation in which truth is defined. Where you find a secular counselor, what we call a secular counselor or a psychologist, their handbook to life will be whichever theory or model that they studied, that they believe explains human behavior. And so those models are always centered around the self, which means I define my own truth and my own reality. We're saying, no, it's not defined by me. It's actually defined external to me. There's truth outside of myself, which explains why I'm here, why these things are happening, how do I respond to these things. And that gives us amazing hope because we know in and of ourselves, there's just so much turmoil and there's so much, our emotions, for instance, are emotions are a beautiful gift from God, but they can also be really up and down. And if I'm going to be defining and understanding meaning and life by that standard, it's going to be a real roller coaster. So we're saying, no, it can't be internal to us. It doesn't make sense that way. It makes sense in external.
Yeah, that's great. I was chatting to David. I wasn't talking to him. We were doing something and somebody asked him a question and he explained it with this analogy, speaking of emotions, that they like kids when you go on a road trip, so you don't put them in the boot and ignore them because they're going to die.
Let's not do that, yeah.
But at the same time, you don't put them in the front seat because they can't control the car. You're going to die. So you put them where they're supposed to be, in the back seat.
Yeah.
They're there. You don't ignore them, but they don't control the car.
It's a very cool analogy.
Yeah. I mean, David's big head. There's some things that swim in there that make sense sometimes.
It's like, it's amazing. And then other times, yeah.
But somebody could hear this and think, which has been a criticism for pastors, Christian counselors, you said now in your explanation, quote unquote, secular psychologists or counselors would go study a specific model. And then the criticism would be, you guys don't study. You just open your Bible and tell us.
You just go, exactly. just like, and now we know all things and stuff. Yeah. Okay.
Where did you study, Kathy?
Can I leave now? No, I'm joking. Okay, so I actually.
And what are the courses you've done? Because you like studying all the time, though.
Yeah, it's because I'm not studying ever. That's why I'm never getting anything done.
There's never a time where I'm like, Kathy's not doing a course.
Yeah, it's pretty sad.
No, it's good.
No, it's good. No. So, I mean, in our profession, we are always about learning all the time. We have to be, it's learning and is not only, or studying is not only important for our skills that we just keep our tool sharp.
Yeah.
It's also important to keep our hearts submitted to God. So we've been doing this is what you're talking about, this continuous studying is all these biblical counseling studies. So this organization in South Africa called Biblical Counseling Africa, and they have made real solid biblical counseling content available. It's from the US, but it's been made available and contextualized here for us.
Stuff.
So I've been doing some of those courses. They've been really amazing. Before that, I did some courses with kind of practically just equipping of practical skills in counseling. So that's more, it was a combination of secular, and these kind of theories, psychology theories, and a bit of Christian. And then before that, I studied pastoral
counseling.
Yeah, okay, that was the qualification.
That's probably changed so much.
Yeah, exactly. It's all
The
confusing.
title.
Yeah, it was partial counseling.
Yeah.
Which was kind of theology and psychology combined together.
Yeah.
And so, which is great because psychology can be a great tool, like a tool in your tool belt.
Sure.
It's a study of how people work, and so we can use those tools in an amazing way in the counseling space. It's really helpful, beneficial, and that doesn't I can go on and on about that. But that doesn't define how I'm viewing you as a person. The Bible defines, and the Bible gives answers. Psychology is a great tool, and we could always learn from it. And that's part of the fun thing about being a Christian and understanding these things is you can spend time looking at the theories out there and unpacking it from with the Bible as your foundation and going, well, how do we approach this as Christians? And it's the Bible just illuminates these things and makes it so rich and beautiful. Sure. So it's a fun space to be in.
It's dope. We're gonna circle back to that, obviously, because I think the stuff we're going to talk about, we'll make a lot of reference to some of the foundations that you just explained now. But I'm like, Jesse, you're dealing with couples who are married. You're dealing with, some tough things that happen in marriage. I remember somebody giving me advice. I was doing a funeral and I could not get the deceased person's image out of my head. Had been in the house probably for like the whole week, with the family. And then weekend I did the funeral and then I just couldn't go home. It felt like they were in my house, and so much so I was like, I need to sleep somewhere else, So me and my wife, we're literally getting the call to call my mother-in-law to be like, can we come sleep over? Cause I just cannot sleep. And somebody was like, on your way home, pick a bin somewhere and like metaphorically throw this image in the bin, and as you drive back tomorrow, you'll pick it up in the bin, engage it, whatever, right? So I was like, oh, okay, cool. So I found the bin, threw it in. I was like, oh, that works. Drove home. I'm free. I'll pick you up tomorrow, right? Yeah. So do you have a couple of bins? Or you just sometimes bring the work into your marriage because you're probably dealing with a severe case at work?
I think seeing couples wrestle with especially there's a lot of water under the bridge. With just so much knives they've put into each other's backs, like that to me propels me towards my husband and going, guy, I love you. Are we investing in our marriage enough? So like that definitely makes me think twice. Because the person you're married to it's a sacred thing. That's the person you're the most vulnerable with. And when that person who's you're the most vulnerable with comes and says you are worthless, right? That cuts to your core, to your identity. And it doesn't even say it sometimes, just by not noticing you. Can communicate that, right? Like, it's nuanced and it can be communicated in so many different ways and unintentionally even. That I don't ever want my husband to have to deal with that kind of hurt from me, and vice versa. So I think it really just pushes me closer to him. And it's great because there are times when we were just so busy, we were just really being functional around each other. Just like, you tick those boxes, I'll tick these, and then I'll see you on the other side, and then it kind of it forces us to slow down and go, okay, what are we missing? But then there are things that, we deal with trauma. So you hear very difficult situations and things happening. I think my dustbin, my bin, I don't necessarily throw it in there, but I've learned over the years to my drive home is good for me. So like I get a chance to process through, think about, pray about. And then I can, by the time I get home, I can step into the the mother wife
yeah.
role and kind of do what needs to be done.
Yeah.
It also just gives me a moment to check in with myself. Because I think sometimes we function. Well, I know I function like I run at 110 kilometers an hour, and so to just say check in and go, Lord, where am I at? Where's my heart at? Do I, get myself ready to go in and serve at home where I don't feel like serving? Those kind of things. Then there are things that stick with me, and that even though I've surrendered it and I've put it, left it at the office, you become traumatized by certain things, and those things, we have great support structures to deal with. So we lean on those support structures. Community.
Yeah,
we need community. Yeah.
No, that's great. Speaking about those traumas, those difficult things, why I wanted to sit down with you is, particularly to talk about just abuse, in relationships, so this podcast for husbands, and part of us becoming better husbands, does not only involve finances, leading our families spiritually, having a vision, etc., etc. Just also controlling our hands, controlling our words, controlling our actions. So we just spoke about how sometimes I don't have to tell my wife that she's useless, but it's in how I treat her, and she feels like I'm giving off, energy. I'm withholding certain affections that make her feel that way. So how can husbands become better, and I think if we don't address one of the biggest elephants, which is all forms of abuse, then how do we become better? There's a lot of wives that watch this. There's a lot of young women who are not married, who some of their fears are seeing how their dads might have abused their moms and therefore they don't want to get married, or just lost hope in marriage completely, because it's like, if I'm single, none of the stuff is going to happen, or if I'm just in a relationship with a door open, once he lays his hand, I'm out, right?
I'm safe,
compared to marriage, where it's like, now I have to go explain to families, and what if he continues because now I've exposed him, or whatever the case is. But another thing is, probably it was like our episode 6 of the season. We had Hungani Ndlovu. He's an actor and also works with an organization called Matrix Man, and they look after men who've either been abused, hurt, feel purposeless, don't have a sense of direction in life, etc. And I think it was the first or the second time, or probably the third time, I've heard people who focus on men. You guys were the first people, in fact. I remember one of your first presentations for Mohau, and you spoke about how you would look after perpetrators as well. And I was like, knee-jerk reaction. I'm like, why? Let's go to jail. These guys need to go to jail, But I think the more you spoke, I was like, oh, smack, like they're also human. They're made in God's image as much as the other person is. We're not excusing your crime. We're not excusing your abuse. We're not excusing any of that stuff. But we're saying you just did not wake up one day and decide, hey, I'm just going to, go like ram into other people. Like what has happened to you? What's going on in your own heart, etc. And how do we help you not to perpetuate the stuff and to actually change? So all of that to say, man, like, where do we even start? What is gender-based violence? What is domestic abuse? I know you said there was a difference. What is the difference? And maybe we'll take it from there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gender-based violence is violence against someone because of the gender.
Sure.
And so in our South African context, that refers mainly to women and children. You probably go as far as saying female children. And the reason why it's such a big thing in South Africa is because that's what our stats reflect, is that abuse happens to women, to the female gender more than to men. Or at least that's what's reported. And so that's the challenge, is that women are more likely to report. Men are less likely to report. And so we don't necessarily know what the stats are in that sense.
Sure.
So gender-based violence is, any kind of abuse, any kind of violence towards women. And it's not just in the context of relationships. It could be molestations or rape. Could be anything in that. Even a random attacking of a woman would be constituted as gender-based violence.
Yeah.
Domestic abuse happens in the context of relationship. It's oftentimes a long-term dance that takes place in relationships. And it's usually, it's someone that you're close to. When there's abuse within families, so the parents are oppressing their children, and they're adults, right?
Sure.
So that's an intimate relationship, which is part of domestic abuse. So there's an intimate relationship. It's not necessarily a romantic relationship, but it can be a family relationship as well. And so there's and it really alludes to this. Any form of abuse is a power dynamic, right? I'm going to force my way and make happen what I want to have happen. And so that just takes place in a family relationship or in a intimate relationship, a romantic relationship. Domestic abuse can happen in a dating relationship. It doesn't have to be marriage. And it's not always obvious. And that's why it's such a difficult thing. In our country, we can do a lot about physical abuse in a marriage or in a relationship. We can do a lot about sexual abuse, but we can't do much about emotional, psychological, spiritual, financial abuse. There's nothing, often it's hard to prove. And the police then our hands are tied in terms of jumping into action oftentimes. And so, and unfortunately, those other forms of abuse that you can't necessarily see happening are the ones that are so detrimental to the it's like a slow killer. It's slowly breaking the person down.
Sure.
So there's like nothing left of them. And those are far reaching. They have a massive impact.
So when you say that they're hard to see, is it hard to see by us who are outside, or by the victim who's in the situation?
It's hard for both.
Okay.
In the context of a relationship, so I mean, you have abuse that happens once of an incident, like a attack, fist fight, or like a rape. That's abuse. It doesn't have to happen again. That's you can define that as abuse and you're fine. Yeah. But when it gets to domestic abuse, you're looking for patterns of behavior. And patterns can be over 20 years. It can be over a couple of months. Sure. It's hard to identify. And so the victim is often confused as to what's really going on. Like they often have a sense, something's not okay here, but it's probably my fault, so I'm probably going to be better,
Sure.
They can't always pinpoint it. And it's often only in counseling that you can look at the big picture and connect the dots for them. And you can say, this has been happening. This play for power has been happening throughout your marriage or throughout the dating relationship or whatever. And so that's why it's even harder for people outside of the relationship to see. Because typically perpetrators are nice people. Yeah. Outside of the home.
Yeah.
And the victim is conditioned to question themselves, so they're not a credible witness. And I almost don't want to say they're not a credible witness. They don't believe that they're a credible witness. Sometimes it's hard to it's hard to understand what's going on, and that's why you want people to come who are victims to places where they have specialized in abuse, so that they can help them identify it. And so when you have those kind of situations where, people are asking questions and you can say, when I didn't make his tea right and he didn't speak to me for 2 days. Sure. That for the outsider, isolated event, okay, maybe he's struggling with depression or something, just be nicer to him. But if it's happening over and over and over in the marriage and the victim can't always see it, then there's a cycle, there's a pattern.
Yeah.
So it's hard to identify. It's hard for the outsider to connect the two and really believe this is abuse. Because the victim is still always often questioning it as well.
Yes. So I mean, without, you know, like sounding off false alarms, if I'm watching this now, how do I, you know, get to the point where I'm like, I actually am being abused? You know, so if it is hard to identify, are there any, like, you know, in your experience, in your line of work, any signs, any, you know, things that would be signals to say, maybe come see us at Mahal, or go to your nearest counseling, or speak to somebody who might have a professional eye who would help you work through? So what are some, you know, again, without sounding false alarms, because somebody might be watching this and they're like, yeah, fairly, he didn't speak to me yesterday, therefore, and it's like, maybe not, but, you know, so what are some signifiers that would help somebody who's genuinely hearing this and listen and watching this, and they're like, that resonates, that sounds, but again, I'm still not sure if it's hard to see, but what are some things that I could probably look out for moving forward?
I think it's easier to answer that question if we understand how abuse works.
Okay.
So let me start there. So I think there are two things: understanding abuse, and that it's in domestic abuse specifically, that it's a cycle.
Yeah.
Or there's a pattern rather. And the second thing is we need to be in community.
Yeah.
Which oftentimes, if it's abuse, is counterintuitive.
Sure.
You know, so, right. So we'll get to that. So the first thing is, when we look at abuse, it's a really great picture of how to understand it is by looking at, back in the day, they used to have kings, and the king would rule the land. And we know from watching, you know, movies that there were bad kings and there were good kings.
Yeah.
A good king would rule his land in such a way that it prospers, that there's peace with the neighbors, neighboring countries, that the people of the country are looked after, cared for, they grow, they learn, they flourish, right? Because the king knows that...
Like King Shaka.
Say?
Like King Shaka.
Like King Shaka.
Come say something, Pat. See what happens. I'm joking.
I'm like, that was very out of the blue. I'm like, I did not know enough about King Shaka to comment on that one.
Good answer.
I like that. Okay, thanks for that, Black. I appreciate it.
So people flourish.
So yes, exactly. So and if you liken that to a marriage, a husband is called to lead.
Yeah.
If he leads well, then his family will flourish and grow. They will not worship him, but they'll worship God. Right? So if you look at the Bible, the good kings called the people to worship God.
To worship God, yeah.
Right? That's what they did.
Yeah.
So in marriage, as a Christian husband, I'm going to call my family to worship God. When we look at the bad kings in the movies and in the Bible, they poured salt on the land so the people couldn't eat.
Sure.
Right? They made sure that people worshipped them. The bad kings ruled in such a way that they got their own.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
I need to be worshipped. I need to be served. My needs are set above anybody else's needs. Right? That's so different to the good king, right? It is just a totally different story. So when there's abuse happening, that the person who's abusing, whether the wife or the husband or the girlfriend or the boyfriend, they're trying to build their kingdom so that everybody worships them. Now, I tend to want to be worshipped, right? It doesn't mean I'm an abuser, right? So we've always got to be checking those things, but it's a good call in our hearts to go, sure, am I trying to get my will done in my house all the time?
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
It's just a good challenge to be checking ourselves on.
Yeah.
But when I'm using manipulation, force, there's so many ways to do it, right? I'm just going to use it kind of generic terms. When I'm using mind games, I'm using fear to consistently make sure that I am worshipped and my needs are met, then we're looking at abuse. Then we're looking at domestic abuse. So when we understand that's what we're looking for this king who wants to be worshipped and not let the people worship God, and be in relationship with others. And, there's so many ways you can draw that out. Then we need to be saying, okay, there are signs here that I maybe need to be asking questions. Okay. And it's a pattern. It's consistent over time. And you're seeing. So you really are looking for a pattern. Those are hard to identify though. But that's why we need to keep in community, right? You want to make sure you've got your best friend or a couple of people who you trust, who you can talk to. You want to make sure that as a couple, you're walking alongside other couples. People are involved in your lives. If you find yourself in a space where you haven't got any friends and you're not socializing with other people as couples, those are warning signs, right? Like, why are you isolated? Why are you isolating? That's not only that could be a sign of abuse. It could also be a sign that there's a problem in terms of spiritually. There's something in your relationship that you guys need to investigate. Because we're called to community as Christians. It's it's a critical part of how we grow. It's a gift that God gives us. That's really hard at times, but it's a worthwhile gift because that's how God's designed us to grow. So you want to have people in your lives that you can ask questions to, people you trust, people who every day, you don't have to always go straight to the counselor or even the pastor. You want to go to Christian friends and go, what do you think of my marriage? What I'm noticing these things. What do you think? And my prayer for you, if you're needing to do that, is that it's someone who's wise, it's going to give you godly counsel. And not fearmonger, right? Or
your friend who actually hates your husband.
Exactly. They're
not going to be objective.
This guy sucks. Point, right?
Or your sister who hates your husband, or even your brother, or whoever, right?
If you're having those conversations and you feel like the person's not getting you, not really hearing what you're saying, and you've got this nagging feeling, give us a call. Like we can, come in. Let's sit and talk about these things. If you've got an uneasy feeling about your marriage that just won't go away, or if you are worried about this power dynamic, if you're feeling like, am I acting out and trying to gain all this worship of myself? It's a good thing to be able to come to a space to just say, well, I want to talk about this, because then even if you're not being in an abusive marriage, or you're not abusive, there might be things in your marriage that need attention. And it's always a good thing to then come seek help rather earlier than later, because once there's all this water under the bridge, it's just so much harder to rebuild your marriage.
That's tough. Some people, maybe let me say this in response. The king's analogy, I think, and anyone who watches this will probably be like, "Here he goes again." But this whole thing of worldviews and the couple holding the same worldview, I think that won't work if you guys don't have the same worldview. I don't even think the analogy of kings then works, because I'm seeing the world a different way, you seeing the world a different way. But I think once you guys have the same worldview, right, whatever your worldview is, and I always say, like, you can be Christian, and I think you both should be Christian if you're Christian. If you're not, sure. I think whatever you believe about God, about humanity, about sin, how we function, I think you guys need to at least meet 80%, 90% on the same things, because if you don't, I think you're always going to be approaching issues from different worldviews, from different understandings, and you'll have to always try and get to some common definition. What do I hear you say about this book? What do you mean this is a book, right? Let's get to this before we start arguing about how the book made our marriage crumble. So I'm like, always having a worldview is very important. And so I think once you have that, so even saying that the good king is meant to lead us to worship the greatest king, right? And that's Jesus. If I don't believe that, like, forget it. Like, I wouldn't even consider you a good king.
You're not on the same page.
We're not on the same page, right? So I think this is just emphasis again. If you watch this and you subscribe to this, be on the same worldview. And I think some of these conversations will also help if you start there. Let's start talking about some essential things about who we are as people and what it is that we believe, so that moving forward in our marriage, at least we know when you say this is what you mean. When I say this is what I mean, right? And so then parallel to that, speaking of definitions, spiritual abuse, what is that? And then after that, what is financial abuse? What is emotional abuse? Because I think, and I start with spiritual because I think it tends to be very abstract. Mm-hmm. I think there's been a lot of talks around emotional abuse. I'm not saying it's less complex. I think it is a monster in and of itself. But I think there's been a lot of conversations that people kind of, but spiritual abuse is very, you watch one or two documentaries on Netflix and it's like, well, if I'm not part of a cult, then I'm not being spiritually abused. And it's like, no, you probably are. Yeah. So what is spiritual abuse? What is financial abuse? What is emotional abuse?
Okay. Again, I'm going to come back to the big picture of what abuse is. So in domestic abuse, when we're thinking of patterns, so you're looking for what the perpetrator is trying to do is to control. Mm-hmm. Why? Because they are entitled. Mm-hmm. They believe they are entitled to it. Mm-hmm. Right? It's a value system.
Sure.
So when you are working with a perpetrator and you're a Christian, your foundation in terms of what values are, in terms of your worldview you talked about now, is already not the same starting point.
Sure.
Okay. So this person believes they deserve to have things their way. Mm. Right? So there's a sense of entitlement. And then there's this punitive pattern as well. So there will be, oh, you don't do this, then you're going to get this.
Sure.
And that not even always physical. Sure. It could be anything, So when we talk about spiritual abuse, we're thinking about in those three areas. We're talking about this person wanting to control you to get what they want, entitlement, and they will punish you if they don't get it by using the Bible or using God.
Yeah, or whatever religion you're part of. Sure.
So if you're going to say, one we hear often is, God says you must submit to me.
Sure.
Right? You're my wife. You need to submit. And then they define what submission means.
Is, yeah.
Not letting God define it.
Yep.
And then
that's why I said it's not a cuss word here. We let God define it.
We let God define submission.
God defines
it's
it,
a
not
beautiful
me.
thing, right? Like when He defines it. Yeah. And that's when you're going to be seeing this person becomes fearful. So it's again not worship of God, because what does that do? It distances me from God.
Yeah, from God, yeah.
Right? Like,
because God is forcing me into this situation.
Yes, He's forcing me to sit here and be hurt by this person. Right? Yeah. Like that's hard. Totally opposite of God's character.
Yeah.
And so
it's evil.
It's a blatant lie. It's it is pure evil. Like distorting the image of God, right? Yeah. It just is. And it gets to the heart, because as a Christian, God is my heart. And now you're saying this God hates me because, and if I want Him to love me, I've got to do what you tell me. Right. So that is, it's creating fear in the person, and controlling them by words. It might not even be in the Bible. And then obviously you're going to be, probably making sure this person's in a church where you can also control the narrative. Sure. So it's not necessarily going to be a Bible teaching church, right? So it's not necessarily going to encourage them to go to Bible studies and stuff like that, because you don't want, the perpetrator doesn't want the victim to understand what's really going on. Sure. What the Bible really says, right? And that's why it can be used, spiritual abuse can be used with children too. So we can justify neglecting children, which is abuse, by using the Bible as well, or forcing them to do what we want them to do, creating fear in them. And again, that becomes sensitive, right? Because like we all grew up going like, you better, because Jesus is watching you. Like, so we're like, what were we living in? Right? Like, so that's something we've seen in our lives. Yeah. But I think again, it's a call for us to check our hearts and saying, am I calling my child to love Jesus, or am I calling my child to fear Him? Right? Like, am I calling my child to look at my life and go, Jesus is beautiful? Yeah. Or am I using my words, using God's word to make sure my child is a good little model in public of what I want. A little mini me in my kingdom. And we all step into that from time to time. Like, I think when I was first studying abuse and domestic abuse specifically, I'm like, wow, man, when I often move towards my child to make sure they just do what I want, meet my need.
Yeah.
I don't care about the rest, and I had to repent, and I had to go like, am I growing? Am I raising this child to love God, or am I raising this child to meet what I think is the right standard?
Yeah.
Is it God's standard or is it mine? Right. So it's always a good thing when we talk about these things to be checking our hearts. Doesn't mean we're abusive. But again, and why do I know that? Because I'll check myself against those 3 criteria.
Sure.
Am I controlling, and am I entitled? Is it punitive?
Yeah.
And yes, it might have been all those 3 things
Yeah.
in that moment. But my heart as a pattern in their lives is not to control them. My heart is to point them to Jesus.
Yeah.
And so those things can happen as isolated incidents because why? We get in the way of what God is doing all the time, right? And then someone once said to me, the most freeing thing ever. I was petrified of having kids. I'm like, I'm going to mess this up. They said to me, you have to mess it up because otherwise they're going to think you're amazing and wonderful and they're never going to turn to Jesus. And so there's that grace again in our moments when we mess up, we can go to I can go to my husband, I can go to my children and say, and I can go to God and say, I need forgiveness.
Sure.
And there's genuine repentance happening, right? Not just like I'm going to say the right thing, right? Sure. There's genuine repentance that happens. And that means I'm pointing my child to Jesus in that moment.
Yeah.
So I kind of got off topic, I think.
No, it's good. So
spiritual abuse, yeah.
Yeah. So financial would probably give us examples because I guess I think that's such a brilliant framework of looking at those 3 things, and then seeing how they apply to, the various, contexts. So whether it's spiritual, financial, emotional, those 3 things are there. But you kind of gave us, examples, in spiritual abuse. So financial and emotional, what would be some examples? Yeah. Hey, sorry to interrupt your viewing. We'll shortly get back to that episode. But if you haven't subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. If you haven't hit the notification bell, please do that so that you're always updated on the episodes that we drop here. We want to change the nation. One husband at a time, one marriage at a time, one family at a time. So if you are inspired, encouraged by all the content that we produce on this podcast, stick around because next week there's another husband who's going to inspire us to do exactly that.
I think for me was I found acting. And it's something that I love, something that I'm passionate about. Yeah. And when I realized that my discipline in my marriage and being married to my wife helps or supports that passion in some way, that's when it clicked for me. To say, I won't be able to enjoy the one fully if I don't master the other one.
But you kind of gave us, examples in spiritual abuse. So financial and emotional, what would be some examples? Yeah.
So again, financial, if I'm trying to make sure I'm in control, and it can be defined as abuse, is when I am on a regular withholding money from my spouse.
Yeah.
Until they do what I want them to do.
Sure.
Right? I've heard terrible stories of mothers being punished for not doing what the husband wants them to do, by the husband withholding money from the family. So for 2 weeks, no one may eat because of what the mother did. And that puts the mother in line very quickly because she doesn't want her children to suffer.
Yeah.
And so that is abuse. It's neglect. It's evil.
Yeah.
Again, or I'll give them an allowance. And I'm not saying there's something wrong with allowances. Some families work that way. That's fine. But when I'm doing it to control and to make sure I'm being king and I'm being served, and there's always this punitive element to it. Then I'm going, okay, I'm only going to give you an allowance that allows you to buy the bare necessities for the house. And if you want to have a luxury, you've got to come and ask me, and you've got to ask me in a certain way, and you've got to do it a certain amount of times, and whatever. So that is again getting to make sure that they're staying just, and it doesn't have to be like blatant, it's logical, if you want luxuries, we can't really afford it. So you need to just come ask me for those extra things, and that's good budgeting.
Yeah.
But when there's control, when it's punitive,
yeah,
that's when you're going, okay, wait, and there's a pattern, then you're going, this is something wrong here. Emotional abuse and psychological abuse kind of overlap at times.
Yeah.
But they are quite different. Psychological abuse has got a lot to do with fear. So you're going, I'm going to make sure this person is afraid, and they're always on edge, and they're always like checking themselves. Like a perpetrator would once slam his hand into the wall next to her head, and say, sorry, I should have never done that. But when next time he gets angry, he'll just make his fist, and then she'll know
that it's coming.
But he won't ever do that again. He'll never ever hit the wall again.
Sure.
But this sign to her means I need to tread lightly, because you're stepping on my comfort zone now. Right? That's what the perpetrator is trying to communicate. So that is a psychological abuse. It's the victim knows what is implied, right? Even though it doesn't ever happen again. The emotional abuse is often, and so I would probably put gaslighting in the space of psychological abuse, because it's but it overlaps quite a bit as well. What you're doing there is you're making the person question their own thinking and judgment, which is quite fundamental to my sense of self, right? Like how I engage with myself. Like you're messing as a person at quite a crazy level, at a fundamental level. So if you're going to be saying to somebody, yesterday you said, A, and then tomorrow you say, oh, I never said that. Why would I say that? That's not what I'm like. Are you feeling okay? And that over time wears away at the person, and they're kind of going, they're feeling like, oh, I'm the problem. Oh, maybe I heard wrong, and they're struggling with this. Can they even trust themselves? And if you can't trust your own interpretation, your own thoughts, that's a very scary place to be. And that makes you very vulnerable. And that means anything this person who you love and who supposedly loves you says to you is like the Bible to you, right? Because you obviously don't know what's going on. So that's the kind of part of that. And it overlaps with emotional abuse, because it's psychological and emotion. So it's a mind game. And that sense may be psychological, but emotional, in that I start to question myself. It has an emotional consequence. Emotional abuse is name calling. There's so many.
Body shaming.
It's basically using your words. Emotional abuse is withdrawing affection. Yeah. Right? A pattern repeatedly with the purpose of trying to gain control of silent treatment can be seen as emotional abuse. Right? So it's a passive way of abusing. Emotional abuse can be, constantly shouting at the person, not even physically hurting them, so it doesn't go into physical abuse, but the person feels battered every other way, right?
So now, one, we've kind of spoken about people who, we've helped them with a few signals, few signs that they should look out for in case they think they're in an abusive situation. But somebody who knows it's just blatant. I know I'm blatantly in an abusive situation. Most of the time, and you might have stats for this, but at least the common narrative is majority of people in those situations are afraid to leave, or afraid to seek help. So what would you say to that majority? Is it true that it is a majority, or it's just a narrative we've kind of imbibed and taken from mainstream media? Is it true that a lot of people are like, ooh, scared, don't want to leave? If it is, what do you say to them?
So if you think of, again, back to the bigger picture, right? If you think of how abuse works, it's about me building my kingdom and meeting my needs, having my needs met. that means I'm going to make sure that the person who feeds into my kingdom is always going to be there.
Leave.
Yeah.
Sheesh.
I'm going to make sure they can't leave. Or at least they believe they can't leave, right?
Sheesh.
Otherwise you lose your kingdom. And if that's what your purpose in life is, it's quite a problem if the person leaves.
Wow.
This is why you have, if a victim leaves a marriage and they maybe go back again, it's harder the perpetrator makes sure it's harder for them to leave a second time and a third time, and it can end in violence. So, the way that they sustain their kingdom is by making sure this person doesn't think they can survive without them. Yeah. Right? So the perpetrator will spew lies that make sure that this person is dependent on them. Right? Remember, they're not letting them worship God, they're letting them worship them. And so if you worship me, that means you need me. Yeah. You can't do anything without me. Yeah. Right? There's the emotional abuse. You could never find a job if they're seeking financial independence. You're just stupid to work, right? So they rely on them financially. The perpetrator's ideal situation is the person relies on them financially, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, in every way. That person needs them. Right? They believe that they need them to survive. So when you start to identify patterns of abuse, it often is hard to leave, because if you've been in that situation for long enough, you don't exist outside of that person anymore. Sure. Yes, God's there, but he can't meet your needs the way the perpetrator can, or he can't make you feel okay like the way the perpetrator can. Sure. So it's really hard to leave. And that's not just what the media says. It's hard to leave. It's hard, therefore, to report it, because once you've reported it, you're admitting to yourself as it's happening. And even with that as a victim, it comes with a whole lot of shame, and questioning and confusion. And so you have to first be able to admit it to yourself, which takes time, before you're going to admit it to somebody else, right? Outside of your marriage. And you're going to have to break isolation. Sure. To have someone in your life that you can trust, right? There's so many barriers. It's not impossible. It happens daily, thankfully, but it can take time, especially in domestic abuse. It's just so much more complex and layered. So it is going to be underreported because of the nature of abuse. It's going to be underreported because of depending on who the victim and who's the perpetrator. And men are less likely to less likely to report abuse. And so they are, we don't know what the stats would be there, but we know it's happening all the time. And all the time in marriages. Right? It's women are not necessarily going to physically abuse, but there are a whole rainbow of abuse types, right? Yeah. And it's real and it's happening. Sure.
That's the kingdom analogy is so crazy, because then I think of people in war-torn countries, and we all sitting in our lovely living rooms with our Wi-Fi, and we're like, why don't you just leave? Yeah. Right? And it's sheesh, man, it's my country. I was born here, live here, speak the language. So leaving is not as easy as just picking up my bags and leave, Sure, there's other people who leave, but a majority of people who stay in war-torn countries, and then you'll find out, this area is occupied by rebels, and they can't even physically leave, even if they have concluded in their minds and have emotionally accepted that I'm going to leave, but maybe physically you can't. Because the thing is, part of, there's no physical barrier, but there's an emotional, psychological, spiritual barrier. And you think, if I go to whatever country, one, will I be accepted if I get there? Or two, if I do get in, I can't even speak the language. There's going to be a new existence. Who am I without, this kingdom that I'm part of? It's crazy. As you're speaking, I'm I hope it's putting perspective and giving perspective to many people. Because, I felt like somebody has just sat down with me and said, hey, grade 2 level, this is what abuse is. And then I'm like, sheesh, okay. Because obviously it's this big thing. We know it's happening. We know it's there. But and that's why I was like, we need to sit and talk. Because I'm you've just kind of distilled it to, hey man, if you have grade 2 level education, this is what this thing is, this is what it functions like, etc. So I'm like, sheesh, okay. And it's that alone is just liberating. Thinking of somebody who's been gaslit, like, you're not crazy. This is what it is.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, the follow-up to that was, what would you say to somebody who's in that situation? How can they find ways to leave the kingdom? Yes, we understand that it's hard, but we would want them to leave the kingdom because we don't want you to stay there. A lot of crazy things have happened, and there's far worse that could happen. Yeah. Like, what counsel do you guys give people? If you like, one, I know if it's not like you're gonna go knock at somebody's house and be like, hey, but there should be a willingness, I think, from somebody to wanna like get out of the situation. But how do we even help them get there? Like how do we help you get out?
If we are looking at it from a perspective of a friend saying, sure, this marriage is not okay, and they're drawing away from me, and is that what you're trying to ask him?
Yeah.
How do we help them?
Yeah.
So being in a relationship with people who might be in a domestic abuse relationship or context means that you're spending time with them and you're making a point of reaching out to them. Oftentimes their world is imploding and they have no capacity to reach out, which especially if it's going to lead to consequences for them.
Sure.
And so it's your responsibility to keep being available for that person.
Sure.
It doesn't mean you force yourself into that situation, but you are there and you let them know that you are there and you regularly check up on them, because you will probably be their lifeline the day they decide to actually leave that situation or to actually seek help. And when you get to spend time with them, then you model by your behavior, your conversation, what is God's design for marriage.
Sure.
You ask questions and you don't say, oh, this is abuse or whatever. Because when I'm not acknowledging that I'm in an abusive relationship, the last thing I want to hear is have a label and say, I'm in an abusive relationship. Because then you're going, well, you don't understand me. You don't understand my husband, so I'm not going to talk to you.
Yeah.
Right? So you don't want to go in there and say, this is what's going on. You want to go and say, sure, that your story you're telling me now that your partner did, it's really controlling, don't you think? So you want to go to the symptoms, like what are they going to be seeing? That's quite a controlling behavior. Like, does it often happen? So you want to almost help them see that there's this pattern here. You want them to discover it. You don't want them to tell them that. So you want to gently and consistently walk with them and say, God designed marriage, just, in Ephesians Ephesians 5. You want to go in Ephesians 5. God says that we are to respect each other in marriage. Like, what does that look like practically? You can even say, I'm struggling with that in my friendship with this person or my relationship. You don't have to be married to be a friend to someone. Right? Like, you can talk about other relationships. How do we respect each other? At work, whatever, you can use examples in your life. And so you're just mirroring the good design of God. And the more they see the goodness of God in his design, the more they're going to become discontent with the opposite of what they're seeing in their marriage. If the person's life is in danger, that's obviously a very different situation. Someone once said, if the house is on fire, you put the fire out. You don't be like, oh, I'm just going to use little soft gloves. Warm here. Stand by the fire. No, you don't do that. Right? If their life is in danger or their children's lives in danger, then you have to act. You need to. And then if you're in a church context, if you're a Christian, then you want to get people in authority involved. So if there aren't people there that are counselors that can meet with the person and try and get them safe, you want to get people in authority involved, and that means you're going to go to the police and you're going to go to people in authority in the victim's church, ideally. But you're going to do what you have to protect. And if it's the children involved, then you go to the police immediately. and social workers will get involved, and that's important to protect them. An adult has to decide to lay a case against somebody. But what you can do is, if they don't want to go to the police, you can say, I'm going to phone the police and say, I'm worried about these people. Can you go check them out? And that's why it's often helpful if the victim doesn't want to do anything, then you say to them, listen, I don't want to break your confidence, but I'm worried about you and I love you, and I'm going to go to the someone in community who's got authority. I'm going to go to the church pastor and get someone to come into that situation. And then at that point, breaking trust is less of a significant thing if their life is in danger.
It's in danger. Yeah. No, that's helpful. Maybe we transition to men. We spoke about men being abused. Yeah, what's the picture there? So most men will not report. Have you guys had men come into the center, or men that you've dealt with over your years of counseling? Like you said earlier on, there's a very, I would even say, more than the 7 colors of the rainbow, there's probably like more other colors of and shades of abuse towards men. Not that there isn't for women, but because men don't talk and men don't seek for help as much, there's probably like a wide spectrum that we're not even aware of, right? But there's husbands who watch this, there's wives who watch this who might also be perpetrators, so walk us through that terrain. What do those waters look like?
When it comes to men being abused, as I said earlier, it doesn't always mean it's physical. It can very well be. But it's not always going to be physical. And often female perpetrators will make use of manipulation and emotional abuse. So calling them names, men names, belittling them, right, as a way to make sure that they don't challenge their authority in the house. And it can be doing that behind doors. It can be doing that in public, in front of other people. Just because someone's got a bouncy personality and they're good in public with other people and the husband isn't, he's an introvert, doesn't mean that that's a bad thing. And so, right, like as a couple, you play to your strengths and weaknesses. But when I'm being bouncy and ignoring my husband because I want to control him and belittle him, then that's something very different, right? When we talk about even victim and perpetrator rehabilitation, we're talking about a heart attitude change, right? God calls us to, he says, I don't want your right behaviors. I want your heart, right? And so what we're wanting to do there is, what is your motivation behind what you're doing? What are you getting at? You might be a spouse that struggles with like negativity. Like you might be really a drain to be around. It doesn't mean that you're trying to control the person next to you by always moaning about them. But if you are always moaning about them, then there's a hard attitude you want to correct, right? And so again, we're looking at those kind of behaviors in the context of, is there a pattern of control, entitlement, and punishment? And punishment is often the thing that helps us really clearly isolate things, right? If you don't, then. And so that's really, I might be entitled in a specific area, and if I'm humbling myself before God and towards my husband, and there's a concerted effort towards repentance and change, that's different. In an abusive marriage, you're not going to seek that. You might say I'm sorry, and you might behave that way for a little while, but then it's going to repeat itself again. And you'll over time realize this person's not really repenting. There's not a real understanding of what repentance means. Repentance and godly repentance is something quite different to what a perpetrator would use. and do. So the repentance again is a form of control, right? That's what they're doing.
Sure.
So to keep you happy, I'm going to repent, but I'm not. That's not a hard attitude change. So you're looking at the motivation behind behavior, and obviously it's hard to see that in another person. But with domestic abuse, you're going to see controlling behaviors from the very beginning of your marriage or your relationship, and often in the beginning it's quite subtle, small things. I don't really like going to your family because this person said this to me, and that's logical. That's hard. This person said that to you. I'm so sorry. But then the next thing is, I don't really want to go visit your friends because, and there are always going to be these reasons and excuses towards isolation, right? Because I want to control, right? So you're going to see small things. Over time, it's going to be like, if you dare go out and talk to anybody, right? Then it's going to be really overt. And so that's the thing about, abuse is it's got a trajectory and it's up. It's never going to stay small. It's going to grow, and it's going to evolve into different things, because the more control I have, the more I want to keep it, and so the more I'm going to do to keep it. And that's why saying something when you're picking up abuse in your marriage is so important, because you might be he hit you once or she hit you once, and it was an accident and whatever. But next time it could escalate to strangling, right? Like it doesn't have a logical progression. It can jump, but it's definitely always escalating. So you do need to, when you're noticing it, you got to speak, reach out sooner rather than later, because it's guaranteed it's going to get worse. So I mean, whether it's a male or a female, husband or wife, you're going to be, if it's abuse, it's going to have the same signs and symptoms. And unfortunately, with women who are often more emotional, so we know how to manipulate emotionally, it's often more subtle. But it's still, you're going to be able to, over time, see those things. Those three things.
I was thinking about, so husband is watching this and they're like, yeah, really, you're right. In one way is my wife withholding sex. She's abusing me.
That's a fun topic to talk about.
Clarifications there for us. Well, what do they call? Do they call you a doctor or a counselor?
I'm a counselor. Please don't call me a doctor.
Dr. Combrink.
I'll sorely disappoint you if I'm a doctor.
Clarifications there. When do I say this is my wife withholding sex to manipulate me, and therefore I could conclude some form of abuse? Or it's just, my guy, listen, like, your wife is a human, and she's not gonna always feel like she wants to get jiggy with you. That's just calm down. There's no abuse there.
Just breathe deeply.
Take a cold shower.
You'll be okay. And that's a hard thing, because as couples, we're two different people and we have different needs, and it's not even like, you can't even always gender profile that. Like, you can't always say this gender doesn't want to have sex a lot or whatever. It really is how God has put you together. And you're going to be different. Your needs are going to be different. And every couple, like I'm sure you guys have discussed, the needs are going to be different there. A marriage that is a good king is going to be one that helps whatever we're facing. Even if it's like, I would like to be intimate more often and my wife doesn't want to, it gives enough space for each person to be where they are, and together under God as a team to wrestle with that and negotiate. It gives enough space for that other person to be who they are, knowing that we're both growing and to learning how to love each other and how to love God, right? So an oppressive and abusive control thing would be very different. There would be, it would be punitive in the sense of, you did A and therefore B is going to happen. So there's going to be a correlation. You're going to look for correlations. Abuse does not allow the person to be who they are, because they need to be who I need you to be, right? It's very different. It's not about collaboration and learning and growing and making mistakes together and figuring this out as a team. It's about you better and I want. So if you're thinking of it in a punitive sense, and now even that is hard, because some women, for women, generally speaking, intimacy in marriage is something that's quite emotional. And so you wanting to already, like, as a man, you can just switch it on, right? So like, you're going to want to start like in the morning already. If this is what you're hoping for tonight. Yeah. You're going to start in the morning already and like say, I love you. And like, why do we do that? Why do men do that? Stereotypically, because they're wanting to affirm their wife and prepare her, and like, because they know for her it's different to them, right? Yes. That's a loving service, right? And a wife in the same way is going to go, I get what you're doing. I see you, and because I love you, even though I don't really like, because I love you, I'm going to allow my heart to be drawn towards you, right?
Start in the morning, gents. In the morning.
Or the day or 2 days beforehand.
Yes, don't just rock up with flowers at 7. That's too late.
It's too late. You got to start earlier. Right. So that is two hearts seeking each other and pursuing each other. If she's going to be using it to get what she wants, now a woman can go, you didn't start loving me in the morning. I can't just switch this on. Sorry. Like, and that is now, again, if there's, that's a very hard one. It's a very individual one. Yeah. But there's a degree to which that is true. Yeah. If she's using it to control, if she's using it to get what she wants, there's a problem, right? Yeah. And it's hard, but you don't always know the person's heart. But what I'm saying is, if that is happening in the bedroom, there are going to be other signs in that relationship of control from her side. Sure. Right?
So it can't just be isolated to this bedroom thing and connected to the rest of our marriage.
Exactly, from the very beginning.
Sure.
Oftentimes, or even maybe what some perpetrators do once you're married to them, that first morning, honeymoon morning, it starts. So they could be just like the best people. Like too good to be true.
Actually, I know a story like that. Where the guy flipped on honeymoon.
And I wondered now. And you better. And and whatever, whatever the control might be. Yeah. And now you're married, so what now, right?
Yeah.
There is, but that can be very fearful. If someone listening to this, that can be very scary. Yeah. And again, that's why you date someone in community. What do their friends say about this guy? What do your parents say about your relationship? Because I guarantee you, the people who are your guardians are going to have an opinion, and usually, and that is usually a good idea to listen to them. Yeah. Listen to your friends. Get to know his friends. There are wisdom things in dating. That's why you don't just date for 3 months and get married. Yeah. Like. Sure. You want to see each other in a couple of seasons of life, right? To get to know this person in every season. Sure. So there's a wisdom to that. And even then, guys, I mean, perpetrators they've got a goal in mind and they're single-minded at it. And so, that it can happen that even with all those precautions, that can you'll still find yourself there. But then you've got community around. Yeah. Reach out. Yeah. It's not hopeless. It's really not hopeless. There is help.
It's dope. It's good, man. Counselor, Dr. Professor Combrink.
Waka waka.
Thank you. Waka waka. This has been a very insightful chat, and I think a helpful one for a lot of people. And I pray and hope that it does lead people to you guys, but also whatever other counseling services and centers that they're close to, so that they can find the help that they need. What we believe and why we do the podcast is we want to try and change one husband, one episode at a time, therefore one marriage at a time, one family, and hopefully the country will change. And part of that change is to do away with the evil of abuse. So maybe ending it here with perpetrators. How do you guys work with perpetrators? I remember one walk I did with you guys, and you had questionnaires for somebody to identify if they are a perpetrator. Again, wild thing for me where I'm like, obviously, you must know you're a perpetrator. Right? You should know. Not always. But not always. So somebody's watching this and they might be a perpetrator and they don't know. So what are some of those things that they need to look out for? How do we help perpetrators, rehabilitate, heal, do better? put down their hands, use their words gently, love more. Yeah.
Working with perpetrators is very challenging. But what has been amazing is we've had people come into the center after some of those walks you talked about, and read the pamphlet and said, I think I'm a perpetrator. And that is unheard of. So we praise God for South Africa, because we have, I think, some real, well, in terms of worldwide stats, we probably have some real anomalies here where people are able to and willing to confront themselves. And that's really amazing. And oftentimes you find that person you're not aware that they're using controlling behaviors.
Sure.
And they are reading this thing and going, oh man, am I maybe doing this? And so then it's about working with their value system and going, well, let's realign with God's value system, in what you're called to as a husband or as a spouse or wife. But generally speaking, perpetrators will not come for help because they don't think they've got a problem.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, if you think of the fact that this is my value system, for whatever reason, I've decided that I'm entitled to these things. Then you are getting to the core of who that person is. And we're saying at the core, you're wrong, which I mean is what the Bible says. And so why would I go to God who says I'm wrong? Because I'm always right. Right? Like, why would I go to anybody and say I'm wrong? Where I'm right, and I deserve these things, and I want to keep building my kingdom because I don't want to lose it. Right? So you've got this narrative all the time that really is a hindrance to change and growth. And I think that so working with a perpetrator is slow and long and hard. And it's slow and long and hard for them. We don't necessarily say to them, you're a perpetrator, right? Like, this is what you're doing. But we are addressing the behavior, and we're calling them to be more like Christ in their behavior. That's how we work with them. And at the moment, we work with them predominantly in counseling, which is very tough because counseling, the temptation in counseling is to build this idea that I'm the center of the universe, right? So like that's counterintuitive for like what you're trying to accomplish. So you've got to be very careful in how you work with it, with the perpetrator in counseling. Also, they are always manipulating to maintain control. So you're always having to think in kind of a couple of levels when you're working with them. What we're going to be doing this year, God willing, is developing a small group context. We've got getting material at the moment for that. And then what is great about that is then you have a couple of people together saying, oh yeah, I do that too. And then they're almost like peer correcting, not someone external saying, oh, you are like this. They can hear themselves and their behavior in others sharing their experiences. That's far more restorative and it's easier process. But it can take 2 to 3 years to rehabilitate a perpetrator. It is it's really long-term work, and it's slow work, and not many perpetrators stay in counseling. The hope that we have as Christians is that we have a all the power of creation behind us in God, and so He is able to work miracles. He is able to change hearts, and when he does that, then things move and change. Other thing that we do is we have in our church, and we're wanting to develop and train other churches in doing the same, is we have a group of people that will come alongside the couple. And the reason why that's important is because the perpetrator will not listen to anybody unless he deems them as someone in authority. Because he's really important, right? Like, makes sense. I'm the king of my kingdom, so another king can only talk to me. You know what I'm saying? So what we try and do is get people in the church community that have authority roles, who are part of like their Bible study group or their life group, to come and walk alongside them. And that's something that it's something we do anyways in counseling. It's a good thing to do. It's good to have community loving you as you're growing in counseling. Even in fact, we even do that with normal marriage counseling. But specifically with with domestic violence, domestic abuse, that is a very helpful model. Because when the perpetrator is controlling, then the victim can call somebody and say, please come and sit with us, or I need help, or then the victim doesn't feel alone. They feel like they've got a community around them too. This thing's in the open now. We've got to deal with this. So there are kind of, those are the couple of ways we worked with perpetrators.
What are some questions in closing that potential perpetrators should ask themselves? Or let me just rephrase it. What are some questions we should be asking ourselves? Regardless of our gender, that would help us to identify if we are perpetrators.
So I guess there are do you take your spouse's phone and check it out regularly to control? Right? Like there's obvious kind of, do you not want your spouse to spend time with their friends? Again, these things as patterns, right? To control. Do you throw and shout and break your spouse's things when they made you angry, right? So there's those kind of obvious questions that are practical, and there are lots out there, and you can contact us if you want a complete list. Like we've got a list of things to help you identify that. At the heart of that, what underlies it is this idea of, am I seeking to control and get all the worship here? Am I seeking to have my way all the time? So am I encouraging my spouse to worship and love Jesus, and love God, right? Like, is there a teachability in me? Is there humility in me? Can I listen to this talk and go, man, like, I think I might need to be a bit more like in this area. Like I need to be checking myself that I think I'm like pushing down my view here, and that's not fair on my spouse or my children or whatever. And take that to God, right? And go, Lord, help me, and take it to your spouse and take it to your children. That is a sign of teachability and humility, right? I'm not trying to build my kingdom. I'm trying to build God's. I'm trying to love and serve these people because they're a gift to me. Those are the kind of telltale signs of a growing Christian who struggles with things. It's normal. Do I allow my spouse to be who they are, or am I determining who they should be? Right? Like that's a problem. Why? Because my heart seeks me and myself and I to be in control, to be the king. Do I want my spouse to always be thinking about what I need? That's the problem. That's causing them to worship me. But those are good questions to be asking for someone who wants to love God and love their spouse more. Yeah.
It's great. Kathy, thank you. And we want to thank your husband.
He's looking after the kids.
Yes.
While mommy's late at work.
Yes. So thank you for pulling through, and hopefully this is not the last time. We might get more questions, or we'll throw them your way. You'll visit. You have people that you work with, so we might even switch teams or faces rather in
Choose
the team.
Other team, please. Yeah, they're far prettier than I am.
So we might have a round two of this. But look into this camera. Please tell us about Mahal, how to reach you guys. How do we get in contact? We'll put your link in the comment section for your website and your details there as well.
Thank you.
But please just tell people how to reach you. Okay.
Thanks for listening to me rant. I appreciate it. It was really great being here with you guys.
Thanks.
Please reach out to us. Black City will put our information there. So you can go to mahaocenter.co.za, and you can pop us a WhatsApp, you can pop us an email, give us a call. Let's see if we can connect you, or just chat through some stuff. We're in Midrand, and Black will say everything's on the website, really. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
This, guys, thank you for watching. I pray this was helpful. Again, if it was triggering and you need further conversation, please reach out to us, reach out to Mahal, or somebody who's close to you, friends, family, church community, counseling centers that are close by. But this is really to help, right? You know, a lot of things are done to bring awareness. I think there is awareness, but what's the next step? How do we help? How do we actually hold your hand and walk with you? How do we, bring healing and start that process? So I pray that this episode did that and it was helpful. Really keen to engage with you. So please leave your comments. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't, and hit the notification bell so that you're updated on every single episode we drop Wednesday at 11:30, except on election day. That's rough. All right. We'll see you on the flip side, man. That Husband Podcast with me, Black Newborn. Do better by knowing better. All right. Peace.
If I want the best body, I'm going to go to gym and it's going to be painful. It's going to be painful. My body's going to be going through aches and pains.
Yeah.
I'm going to get hurt. I'm going to have to recover. I'm going to have to consult nutritionists. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's funny that like in all the other areas of our lives, you know, when it comes to getting better, we prepare to do the work. We prepare to sacrifice. But marriage, you know, it must be easy.
Bro.